All right, let's cut the crap. You think you know France, right? Wine, cheese, Eiffel Tower, maybe a snooty waiter or two.
Oh, yeah, the stereotypes.
But get ready to have your mind blown
Yeah,
because we're about to dive deep into the real France.
yeah.
Shit you won't find on those tourist traps.
France is a land of contradictions, Powerful but romanticized. A
Right.
nuclear-armed state with a serious global presence.
Uh-huh.
But everyone just thinks about croissants and romance.
Yeah, it's like they're playing both sides. So what's the deal with this global powerhouse thing? Are they really that influential?
Absolutely. They're a founding member of the EU,
Right.
a permanent member of the UN Security Council, and get this, they have the second largest exclusive economic zone globally.
Hold up. Second largest. Who the hell beats them in controlling a shit ton of ocean?
Only the US.
Okay.
But France's EE is still massive, giving them major clout in fishing rights, deep sea exploration, you name it.
Huh.
A
Interesting.
bigger deal than most people realize.
Damn, I never thought of France as a maritime badass.
Right.
It's always those tiny-ass countries you hear about with huge ocean territory.
And then there's their history, packed with wars, conquests, revolutions.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys were kicking ass way back in the day, like when the Gauls sacked Rome in 390 BC.
Wait, are we talking about the French here? Like the baguette-munching, beret-wearing French?
Well, not exactly those French.
Okay.
We're talking ancient Gaul, Celtic warriors who were seriously hardcore. They gave the Romans a run for their money.
So how the hell did we get from javelin-chucking Gauls to the France we know today?
That's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
The word France actually comes from the Franks,
The Franks?
another group of warriors.
Wow.
Germanic tribes who conquered Gaul around the 5th century AD. And get this, the word Frank itself means free.
Free.
Historians think it might be because they were exempt from taxes after taking over.
Tax-free warriors. Those Franks knew how to party.
All right.
So they basically laid the groundwork for what would become France.
Exactly. And one of their kings, Clovis I, a real cunning bastard, did something pretty smart. He united the Frankish tribes and then converted to Christianity.
Always got to play the religious card for power, right?
It was a brilliant move. By getting the backing of the Catholic Church, Clovis solidified his power, and it stuck. France earned the title eldest daughter of the church for being one of the first kingdoms to adopt Christianity.
Wow.
This close relationship with the church shaped a lot of their history.
So they were tight with the Pope and all that. Talk about having friends in high places.
Big time.
Yeah.
And then King Charlemagne, Clovis's descendant,
Okay.
he was a total empire builder, conquering a vast territory across Europe.
Yeah.
We're talking modern-day France, Germany, Italy, parts of Spain. The guy was a legend.
Sounds like someone who would have a biopic on Netflix.
Right.
So Charlemagne built this massive empire. What happened next? Did the good times keep rolling?
Not quite.
All right.
When Charlemagne died, his empire was divided up,
Ah.
and that set the stage for a lot of future conflict.
Of course.
It's like they couldn't resist a good power struggle.
Classic European drama. So after Charlemagne's empire went kaput, what happened to the French? Did they finally settle down with their wine and cheese?
Hardly. They had centuries of wars, religious conflicts, and power grabs ahead of them. Take the 100 Years' War, for example.
100 Years' War. I vaguely remember that from school.
It wasn't just some boring history lesson. It was a brutal, bloody conflict with England that lasted, well, you guessed it, 100 years. This war really forged French national identity.
So much for peace and quiet. What else went down? Was it nonstop fighting?
Pretty much. Then you've got the French Wars of Religion in the 16th century.
Oh, this doesn't sound good.
Catholics versus Huguenots, French Protestants. Talk about a bloodbath. There was even a massacre on St. Bartholomew's Day where thousands of Huguenots were slaughtered. Brutal stuff.
Fucking hell. Religion brings out the worst in people sometimes. But hey, amidst all this bloodshed, didn't they manage to build some of those fancy-ass palaces?
Yes. That brings us to the era of Louis XIV, the Sun King.
Sun King. Catchy.
The epitome of absolute power and extravagance. Think Versailles, lavish parties, the whole 9 yards.
Sounds like my kind of dude. Living it up king style. So everything was sunshine and roses under the Sun King.
Not exactly. Remember those Huguenots we talked about?
Yeah, it was French Protestants.
Well, Louis XIV revoked the Edict of Nantes, which had granted them religious freedom. This forced many of them into exile, which was a huge blow to the country.
Damn, talk about a buzzkill.
Yeah.
So religious tolerance wasn't exactly his strong suit. What else did he get up to?
Well, there was also the Code Noir,
Code Noir.
a set of laws that basically legalized slavery in the French colonies.
Right.
It's a dark chapter in their history that's often glossed over.
There's the dark side. Every powerful empire has its skeletons in the closet, right? But wasn't this also around the time of the French Revolution? Didn't they, chop off the king's head and all that?
You're right on the money. The French Revolution was a pivotal moment in history. France in the late 1700s was a powder keg of social inequality, economic woes, and a clueless monarchy.
Yeah.
They were ripe for a revolution.
So what was the spark that set the whole thing off? Was it like one specific event or just a buildup of frustration?
The storming of the Bastille in 1789 is considered the symbolic start of the revolution. It was a prison that represented the king's authority,
Right.
and when the people stormed it, they sent a clear message: the old ways were over.
Hell yeah, stick it to the man.
Yeah.
But wasn't the French Revolution a total bloodbath? Like, didn't they go a little overboard with the whole guillotine thing?
It definitely got messy. The Reign of Terror was a period of extreme violence and political upheaval. Thousands of people were executed by guillotine, including King Louis XVI. But you can't deny that the revolution gave birth to some of the most important ideas of modern democracy: liberty, equality, fraternity. Those ideas still resonate today.
Yeah, those are some powerful concepts.
Yeah.
And of course, then you've got Napoleon bursting onto the scene.
Right, Napoleon Bonaparte, a military genius who rose to power in the wake of the revolution. He became emperor and conquered much of Europe, spreading those revolutionary ideas along the way.
Didn't he try to take over Russia too? How'd that work out for him?
Not so well. His invasion of Russia in 1812 was a disaster.
Oh,
He made it to Moscow, but the harsh Russian winter decimated his army.
ouch.
And he was eventually defeated and exiled.
Right.
It's a classic tale of ambition, brilliance, and ultimately failure.
A cautionary tale for anyone with a god complex.
Right.
So Napoleon gets his ass handed to him, and what happens to France? Did they go back to square one?
Not quite. France went through a period of instability with the restoration of the monarchy, but the revolutionary spirit lived on.
Of course.
And they just couldn't resist another revolution or two down the line.
Oh, so those French just love to shake things up. They can't seem to sit still for too long. What about modern France? Are they still a major player on the world stage?
Absolutely. They had a massive economic boom after World War II, known as the Trente Glorieuses, or the Glorious 30.
The Glorious 30 sounds fancy.
But they also went through a difficult period of decolonization as their colonies in Africa and Asia gained independence.
Right.
The Algerian War in particular was a brutal and divisive conflict.
Decolonization is never pretty. It's like the hangover after a long imperial party.
Yeah.
So what's France like today? Are they still a force to be reckoned with?
They're a leading force in the EU,
Uh-huh.
a global center for art, science, and culture.
Okay.
They have a lot of influence in international affairs, but they also face a lot of challenges: economic crises, social unrest, and the integration of a large immigrant population.
I see.
It's a complicated picture, but definitely not boring.
Sounds like they've got their work cut out for them. So what's the big question for France in the 21st century? Can they hang on to their superpower status, or are they headed for a decline?
That's the million-dollar question.
I guess we'll have to wait and see.
It's fascinating to see how they navigate the challenges of a rapidly changing world.
It's like they're walking a tightrope between their glorious past and an uncertain future.
Exactly. And how they handle that balancing act will determine their place in the world. It's a story worth watching for sure. It's fascinating how those contradictions we talked about play out in modern France.
Yeah, like what?
They have this legacy of a strong, centralized state,
Right.
Going back to those absolute monarchs like Louis XIV.
Right.
But they also have the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity born out of the revolution.
Uh-huh.
It's a constant tug of war.
So which side wins out? Are the French more about individual freedom or following the rules?
Right.
Do they even know?
It's a constant tension, and it shows up in a lot of aspects of French society.
Yeah.
Take the concept of laïcité, for example.
Laissez-faire.
It's their version of secularism.
Okay.
The separation of church and state.
Mhm.
It's deeply rooted in their history, going back to the revolution when they basically kicked the church out of politics.
That was pretty hardcore.
Yep.
So is religion like totally banned in France? Can't they even say a prayer in public?
No, it's not that extreme.
Okay.
People are free to practice their religion,
Right.
but the state doesn't endorse or favor any particular one.
Okay.
And they're pretty strict about keeping religion out of public life. For example, you can't wear religious symbols in schools.
Wow, that's a whole different world from what we're used to.
Right.
So how do the French feel about all this?
Yeah.
Are they cool with the government telling them what they can and can't wear?
It's a complex issue, and people have strong opinions on both sides.
I bet.
Some see laïcité as essential for protecting freedom of conscience and equality,
Okay.
while others view it as discriminatory, particularly towards Muslims.
Right. Yeah.
It's a debate that's still going on today.
It's like that whole burkini ban a few years back.
Exactly.
People were losing their minds over women wearing swimsuits that covered their hair.
Yeah.
Seems a bit much, if you ask me.
It was a prime example of the tension surrounding laïcité. The government argued that it was about upholding the secular nature of public spaces,
Okay.
but many saw it as a way of targeting Muslim women.
Yeah.
It's a debate that's still going on today.
Yeah, those culture clashes can get pretty heated.
For sure.
But hey, let's switch gears for a minute and talk about something a little lighter. Like French food. Is it really as amazing as everyone says? Or is that just hype?
Oh, it's the real deal. French cuisine is world-renowned for a reason. They've got this incredible tradition of culinary excellence,
Right.
using fresh, high-quality ingredients and techniques that have been passed down through generations. They take their food seriously, and it shows.
So it's not all just snails and frog legs.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm down to try new things, but I need some substance too.
Yeah.
What are some must-try dishes if you're in France?
Well, each region of France has its own specialties, so you're in for a treat wherever you go.
Okay, cool.
In the Southwest, you've got cassoulet, a hearty stew made with beans and meat.
Okay.
In Alsace, there's choucroute, a dish of sauerkraut and sausage.
Sauerkraut and sausage. That sounds kind of German.
Yeah, well, they share a border.
True, true.
And of course, you can't forget about the classic beef bourguignon from Burgundy, a rich, slow-cooked beef stew.
Man, that all sounds amazing. And don't even get me started on the cheese.
Right. French cheese is in a league of its own. Hundreds of varieties, each with its own unique flavor and texture.
Yeah.
Brie, Camembert, Roquefort.
Mhm.
The list goes on. And we can't forget the wine. France is one of the world's leading wine producers, with vineyards all over the country.
It's a foodie's paradise.
It is.
But what about the French themselves? Are they really as snooty as people say? Or is that just a stereotype?
Like any culture, you'll find all sorts of people in France.
Yeah,
You'll
so-
encounter friendly folks, grumpy folks, and everything in between.
Nah.
But I think the stereotype of the snooty French waiter comes from a certain pride they have in their culture and traditions.
Mhm.
They're passionate about their food, their language, their art. And
Wow.
sometimes that passion can be misinterpreted as arrogance.
So it's more about pride than just being a jerk. I can respect that. But hey, they can be a little intense, right? Like I've heard stories about how serious they take their strikes and protests. They're not afraid to shut things down,
That's for sure.
really.
The French definitely know how to make their voices heard. They have a long tradition of social activism and protest going all the way back to the revolution.
Hmm.
They're not afraid to take to the streets and demand change, and they can be pretty persistent about it.
Yeah, I've heard those French labor unions don't mess around.
Nope,
They'll shut down the whole damn country if they have to.
they will.
They know how to make a statement.
That's right. They see it as a way of protecting workers' rights and fighting for social justice. And honestly, it's often effective.
Yeah.
The French government knows that if they don't take the concerns of the people seriously, they could have a full-blown crisis on their hands.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like a built-in pressure valve for the system.
Exactly.
But let's be real. All that protesting can be a bit of a pain in the ass if you're just trying to get around or enjoy your vacation. I don't need that kind of stress when I'm trying to relax.
True, it can be disruptive.
Yeah.
But it's also a sign of a vibrant democracy where people are engaged and willing to fight for what they believe in. And honestly, I kind of admire that.
Yeah, there's something to be said for a country where people aren't afraid to stand up for themselves.
Absolutely.
But speaking of standing up, didn't the French kind of get a reputation for surrendering during World War II?
Uh-oh.
What was that all about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's that old chestnut.
Yeah.
The fall of France in 1940 was a complex event with a lot of contributing factors.
Right.
The German army was incredibly powerful,
Right.
and the French military was unprepared for their blitzkrieg tactics.
I see.
But there were also internal divisions within France, and their leadership was, to put it mildly, not at its best.
So it wasn't just a case of the French being cowards. There's more to the story.
Absolutely. There were many brave French soldiers who fought valiantly against the Nazis.
Okay.
And let's not forget about the French resistance.
Oh, yeah.
A clandestine network of fighters who risked their lives to sabotage the German occupation.
Yeah.
Those were some true heroes.
Right. The resistance. They were like the OG underground movement fighting back against oppression.
Exactly.
So how did France recover from the war? Was it a quick bounce back or a long road to recovery?
It was a long and difficult process, but they managed to rebuild their economy and their society.
Yeah.
And in many ways, World War II was a turning point for France.
How so?
They came out of the conflict with a renewed sense of national purpose and a determination to play a leading role on the world stage.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
And they definitely stepped up to the plate. They're a major player in the EU. They've got nukes. They're involved in all sorts of international stuff.
Hmm.
But what about their relationship with the U.S.?
Oh, that's a good one.
We've been allies for a long time, but we've also had our fair share of disagreements.
It's a complicated relationship, that's for sure. We were allies during the American Revolution. We
Right.
fought together in both world wars.
Yeah.
But there have been some tense moments, particularly during the Cold War, when France wanted to chart its own course.
Like when de Gaulle pulled France out of NATO's military command structure?
Yeah,
That pissed off a lot of Americans.
rightly so.
What was he thinking?
De Gaulle was all about asserting French independence and sovereignty. He didn't want France to be seen as just a pawn in the U.S.-Soviet rivalry.
Okay.
He wanted France to have its own voice on the world stage.
I can see his point.
Right.
It's like being the younger sibling who always gets bossed around eventually. You want to break free and do your own thing.
Exactly.
But haven't things warmed up a bit between the U.S. and France in recent years?
Definitely.
Okay.
France rejoined NATO's military command in 2009, and we've cooperated closely on a lot of issues, from counterterrorism to climate change.
So we're back to being buddies,
Pretty much.
even though we steal their fries and they make fun of our waistlines.
We may have our differences, but we also share a lot of common values and interests. And in today's world, the US and France need each other. We're both major powers with a lot of influence.
Strength in numbers, right?
Yeah.
But let's talk about France's role in the world today. What are their big priorities? Are they trying to save the world or just looking out for themselves?
They're definitely focused on maintaining their position as a leading force in Europe.
Okay.
They're also a major player in international organizations like the UN and the G7.
Hmm.
And they're becoming increasingly active in areas like Africa and the Middle East, where they have strategic interests.
So they're not just sitting back and enjoying their wine and cheese. They're still out there playing the power game.
They're very much engaged in global affairs. They see themselves as a champion of human rights, a defender of democracy, and a promoter of multilateralism.
Mhm.
They want to be seen as a force for good in the world.
Sounds pretty noble.
Yeah.
But do they actually walk the walk, or is it all just talk? Because let's be real, every country has its hypocrisy.
Like any country, they have their contradictions.
Right.
They're a major arms exporter.
Yeah.
They've been criticized for their interventions in Africa. And they have their own internal struggles with social inequality and racism.
Right.
It's a mixed bag, for sure.
It's like the saying goes, do as I say, not as I do.
Exactly.
But hey, nobody's perfect. So what's the big picture here? What's the future looking like for France? Are they on the upswing or headed for a downfall?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
They face a lot of challenges, both internal and external.
Okay.
They have a growing public debt, high unemployment, and social tensions over immigration and integration.
Right.
And they're trying to navigate a world that's becoming increasingly multipolar. With the rise of China and other powers, it's not an easy path.
So lots of uncertainty on the horizon.
Definitely.
But hey, the French have an knack for overcoming challenges,
I do
right?
too.
They've been through a lot over the centuries,
They have.
and they've always managed to come out swinging.
They have. And they've always managed to come out stronger on the other side.
Okay.
They're a resilient people with a strong sense of national identity and a belief in their own destiny. I think it's safe to say that France will continue to be a major force in the world for many years to come.
All right, so we've covered a shit ton of ground here, from those badass Gaul warriors
Oh,
to
yeah.
nuclear diplomacy, fancy food, and those infamous French protests.
Uh-huh.
It's clear that France is a country of contradictions, like you said before.
Sure.
But I'm curious, what's the one thing you think people really need to grasp about France? What's the key to understanding this complex and fascinating country?
That's a tough one, but I think it boils down to this. France is a country constantly wrestling with its own identity.
Okay.
They're trying to reconcile their glorious past
Right.
with the realities of a rapidly changing world.
So it's like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place tradition versus progress. How the
Yeah.
hell are they supposed to navigate that?
It's a balancing act, and they don't always get it right.
I imagine.
France is grappling with economic stagnation, social unrest, the rise of populism, and the never-ending debate about immigration.
Yeah.
It's a lot to handle.
Yeah, those are some heavy issues. And like every Western country is dealing with this shit right now.
Right.
But what makes France's situation unique? Is it just more of the same, or is there something else going on?
What's fascinating here is that France has this deeply ingrained sense of national identity,
Okay.
a certain idea of what it means to be French,
Right.
and it's clashing with the realities of a globalized, multicultural world.
So it's like they're clinging to their old ways while the world is changing around them. Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It creates a lot of tension, for sure.
Okay.
On one hand, you have those who want to preserve traditional French values and culture.
Yeah.
They're wary of immigration,
Right.
skeptical of the EU,
Yeah.
and they're looking for strong leadership to protect their way of life.
Sounds kind of familiar. We've got a similar vibe going on over here in the States.
Right. And then you have those who see France as a modern, diverse country that needs to embrace globalization and change. They're more open to immigration, they're pro-EU, and they're looking for solutions that address social and economic inequality.
Okay.
It's a real clash of perspectives.
So you got this classic divide between those who are clinging to the past and those who are looking ahead to the future.
Yeah.
It's like a tug-of-war for the soul of France.
And it's playing out in their politics, their media, their everyday lives.
Wow.
It's a debate that's not going away anytime soon.
Man, it's a lot to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
But hey, that's what makes this deep dive so interesting, right? It's not just about learning some fun facts. It's about understanding the complexity of a nation,
Absolutely.
the forces that shape it, and the challenges it faces.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that there are no easy answers. France is a complex country with a rich history and a vibrant culture, and their story is far from over.
So there you have it, folks. We've explored the real France, warts and all. From bloody revolutions to delicious pastries,
It's quite a range.
from powerful kings to rebellious citizens.
Right.
It's been one hell of a ride.
And we've only scratched the surface. There's always more to uncover, more to understand about this captivating country.
I'm ready for that croissant and Bordeaux now. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with a final thought. What do you think the future holds for France? Will they figure out how to balance their traditions with the demands of a changing world? Will they remain a leader on the global stage, or will they fade into the background? Something to ponder.
France's journey is far from over. And as they continue to evolve, one thing is certain. Their story will continue to captivate the world.
Thanks for joining us on this wild deep dive. Now go impress your friends with your newfound French knowledge. Maybe try a new cheese while you're at it. And hey, if you ever find yourself in Paris, try not to get caught in the middle of a protest. Just a friendly tip.